Howdy again everyone. Today I'm really pleased to be testing out a nice new copy of the Tamron 70-300mm f4.5-6.3 III RXD, which has just winged its way into my office. I'm not just pleased about this because I haven't tested a 70-300mm lens in a while, and I really quite like them for their really handy zoom ranges and generally good image quality, but I am happy because this lens, originally just for Sony E-mount cameras, has officially made its way over to Nikon Z mount with Nikon's blessing. It's so good to see third-party lenses arriving on Nikon Z, and long may this continue. I was really curious how well it would work on Nikon Z, so I'd like to thank Tamron's UK distributor for loaning me a copy of this lens for a couple of weeks for testing, although as usual this is a totally independent review. The lens costs $700 or £700 here in the UK and offers a full-frame image circle. The lens might not have a very bright maximum aperture, but that zoom range of 70-300mm makes it fantastically useful for all kinds of subject photography and general telephoto work. It'll be a good start for a bit of wildlife photography too, although you might want something that can zoom in a bit further if you want to shoot small birds from a distance. Bear in mind that 70mm is not a wide angle at all, so you'll obviously want to complement a lens like this with something else a bit wider. Let's take a look at the lens's build quality. It's a dead simple piece of kit that feels lightweight, being made of plastic, but still it's nice and solidly constructed with a nicely textured finish. It actually feels quite handy and quick to use in your hand. It weighs a little over half a kilogram or under 1.5 pounds. It's based on a metal lens mount with a weather sealing gasket. Interestingly, there's a waterproof USB-C port on the side of the lens that wasn't there on the Sony version of the lens for future firmware updates. The lens has no auto manual focus switch or focus limiter switch, so you'll have to control that using your camera. At the rear you can find a manual focus ring which turns averagely smoothly. On my Nikon Z7 camera, the manual focus response was a little slow, but it got you there. Some good news is that I didn't see much focus breathing on this lens, as you can see in this footage. The lens's autofocus motor is quiet, accurate, and it worked quite quickly in my tests, even on my older Nikon Z7 camera. And then you get a liberally sized rubberized focus ring. On my copy of the lens it turned fairly evenly, averagely smoothly without any stickiness, but heavily enough that zoom creep wouldn't be a problem. The lens comes with a generously sized lens hood made entirely of plastic, which clicks in place positively with a nicely textured finish. Its filter thread size is 67mm wide. Tamron have been trying to keep this as a uniform size across as much of their range of lenses as possible, so if you end up buying a whole new set of Tamron lenses, then you probably won't have to invest in a whole load of different filters. Something you need to know is that this lens does not have its own image stabilization, so you will definitely want to use it on a camera with in-body stabilization. Otherwise you'll be getting some pretty blurry images out of it most of the time. Overall though, this Tamron lens is pretty simple to use, without many features, but it works totally fine in everyday use. Let's move on and look at image quality now. I'm going to be testing it here on a Nikon Z7 full-frame camera with its 45 megapixel sensor. In-camera corrections are turned on. At 70mm and f4.5 we see brilliant sharpness in the middle of the image. Contrast is just good. The corners are noticeably softer but still pretty good. Stopping down to f5.6 or f8 sees little increases in brightness and contrast, but no more sharpness. Let's zoom in halfway to about 160mm. The maximum aperture has now darkened a little to f5.3. The middle of the image still looks fantastic, and now the corners are looking much better too. Stop down to f8 or f11 for, again, little increases in brightness and contrast. Finally, let's zoom all the way into 300mm. In the middle of the image at f6.3, sharpness is great, but contrast is a little low again. The corners are just a little softer, but still very good. Stop down to f8 for a bit more brightness, but not much more in the way of sharpness. f11 is still fine, but stop down to f16 for softness to emerge due to diffraction. Overall, the lens is nice and sharp throughout its whole zoom range, even into its image corners. Although contrast isn't very strong, you will find yourself adding more in editing. Let's look at distortion and vignetting, again on a full frame camera, and this is what you'll see with in-camera corrections turned off. At 70mm we don't really see any distortion, although at f4.5 vignetting is a little strong. Stop down to f8 and the corners brighten up noticeably. Zoom in and pincushion distortion quickly becomes apparent, and the corners are dark again at the brightest aperture. At f8 and f11, again, they brighten up. So you'll definitely want to use corrections with this lens, although its performance isn't dramatically worse than usual for a telephoto zoom. Let's look at close-up image quality now. When you zoom all the way in, the lens can focus down to 1.5 meters. Comparatively, that's further than average, but still just about close enough for some smaller subjects. At f6.3, close-up sharpness and contrast remain very good. Stopping down to f8 doesn't bring any improvement in sharpness. Now let's take a look at how the lens works against bright light. It's a very good show here. There's almost no flaring at wider angles, and it's only when you zoom in that a tiny bit seems to pop up, but overall that is a great performance. Finally, let's take a look at the quality of this lens's bokeh. It's not easy to get autofocus backgrounds here because of its slightly darker maximum aperture than usual. Generally, the quality of this lens's bokeh is on the good side of average. It can look a bit edgy with difficult backgrounds, but there's nothing too disturbing going on here. Overall, while its build quality might be nothing to write home about, the Tamron 70-300 RXD offers a good optical performance for its price, and it's good to see a lower budget 70-300mm full frame lens out there for Nikon shooters. It can produce fairly sharp images, and there are no serious image quality issues, although if you're shooting at 300mm you'll want to correct for vignetting and colour fringing. If your camera does not feature its own image stabilization, then you might want something else for handheld shooting and video work, but otherwise it's a good, versatile lens for its price, and it comes recommended. I hope you've enjoyed this video. It's my pleasure to put these reviews together for everyone. If you find them helpful, then feel free to check out my Patreon page, where you can find all kinds of exclusive content and videos and sneak previews for anyone who'd like to support the channel for only $3 a month. It's not just about my personal beer fund, it makes a real difference to keeping these tests going. See you next time.